This week on Break It to Make It, as part of our 500 download celebration, we're taking a look back at some of our favorite moments.
How can organizations or individuals create a space where people feel comfortable having fun, letting their freak flag fly? What advice do you have for people, for players, let's call them?
Yeah, I think you hit the big one. Play is something that's funny. It's another one of those backwards law things where if you try to fall asleep, you're less likely to fall asleep. If you try to go to the bathroom, you're less likely to go to the bathroom. If you try to make it the best night ever, like wedding nights and New Year's Eves, as a DJ, I hated those events because there's so much pressure on it that it almost sucks all of the fun out of it. So a couple of things to rewind that. Number one, lower the stakes. It's not that important. We're all going to survive. You're going to have to do this again tomorrow. Take all of the pressure off of it. When you put deadlines on yourself, when you're working too hard at things, your brain actually shuts down. There's scientific processes here. Cortisol goes up. You narrow your focus on one right answer that allows you to survive, and you lose all the peripheral vision, all the blood flow to your brain, and all the good chemicals that allow you to see things creatively. So lowering the stakes, and then creating more, thinking about just taking more swings at it. Instead of one right answer, how do we come up with 10 bad ones? If we create more options for ourselves, then we can sort through those and we can start thinking more laterally than just like vertically and narrowly. And I think the other thing from that is starting to accept that less is more sometimes is really hard for people. We all think that more money, another step up the ladder, if I just get one more client or we just grow one more revenue, that we'll be happier. But at some point, you have to choose to be happy with what you have. So actually wanting less allows you a lot of freedom. We were talking about this before we came on, Fallon. Both you and I like a low bar, right? Because once I cross the bar, then I can go for the moon. I can shoot for it. Be like, hey, I know I've got my bills covered. I can take some bigger risks here. Or I know that I'm not going to lose my job. I can take a big swing. But when we set the expectations so high that we can't ever live up to them, then all we do is fail and stress ourselves out. So I think you have to decide what is the perfect career for you. What's the perfect amount of money for you? What's the lifestyle you want? What kind of business that you want? I think our society always says we need to scale and be the next Amazon. And all that does is eliminate opportunities for enjoying what we have now and stuff. And then I think finally, there are two things that are kind of loopholes. I always say yes to opportunities. Some of them will work out and some won't. So say yes more than you say no to things, even with your team. If you want them to be more creative, say yes to more of their ideas than you say no, and they'll come up with more ideas. If you say no more often than you say yes, they'll stop giving you ideas because you shoot them down. So there's some of that. The other one is, it's a loophole in our society that hasn't gotten sucked out yet, that is gifts and invitations. Is when you require somebody to do something, they don't want to do it. They push back. We're all kids, right? The reverse psychology works. Your mom just told you to go clean your room. The last thing you want to do is clean your room. But if you invite someone to a party, they can say yes or no, and there's no pressure on that. There may be some small societal pressure, but if we invite them to be playful, if we invite them to participate on this project rather than telling them it's mandatory and required, they'll be more likely to join us in this party and come in on it. The second one is gifts. So when we give someone a gift, it's no obligation. It's here. I made this. If you like it, great. If you don't, regift it. I don't care. And I think if we think about our work like that as a gift to our clients and to other people, and that if they want to compensate us, then great. If they love it and they want to do it again, perfect. But I got to do the part that I love. I got to make the gift. And that's what I love about doing podcasts or events like this or hosting game shows. I have fun doing the game show. That's all that matters to me. If I make enough money that I get to do it again tomorrow, then great. That's all that I needed. So give more gifts to people. Think of your work as a gift and just give it away. And you'd be surprised in what you get in return. And same thing, if you invite people to join you on the mission, the journey, or in a playful spirit, people want to play too. We all want to be happier. We'd rather not be stressed. It's just we're not given that option very much.
In a corporate setting, we talk about strengths-based leadership a lot. Focus on, as you refer to it, your special talents rather than focusing all the time on bolstering places where maybe you're not as good as other people. And it sounds like this model really creates space for that. And it must have great emotional benefits for kids. I think about neurotypical children who are very focused on one specific thing, and the ability to flourish and be encouraged in that direction rather than keep trying to transition them back to something that maybe they just don't care about and they're never going to use because it's not part of their passion. Now, I would love to keep talking to you all day, but we are almost at our time. So I want to get to our final two little pieces here. The first one is there any child or student that hybrid doesn't work for? Is there anyone that you would caution against pursuing a hybrid model?
Yeah, I have two kids. One of my sons graduated from our school. He's more introverted. He doesn't care about the whole football scene, prom, that type of stuff. He wanted to go to school. He wanted to learn. He wanted to be around a few friends. He wanted to see teachers. The kid that wants this big school experience, and that's my younger child, would not thrive in an environment like ours. He wants the big school, the football, the cheerleaders, the homecoming, etc. So, your child, every kid's different, and if you have multiple kids, the siblings are all different. So it just, to me, it just depends on who the kid is.
But there are so many people, I think, who can relate to this. Maybe we've been fortunate enough to not have been faced with as much fear and tragedy, but still that perfectionism cycle and the continually moving the goalposts. I know you and I have spoken about this before, but this funny part of the human condition where we set ourselves a goal and we think once we get there, we're going to be happy. Once we get there, it's going to be great. And then we get there and then we move it. And we're never quite happy, and it's always on, and we're just working harder and harder and harder and, chasing those golden handcuffs that you talked about. But help us understand, I can see this is where the light went on for you, and then you didn't have the skills. But what are the skills that we need to set up our brain for our best life? What were the skills that were missing that really turned it around for you?
So to continue that story, so what happened for me next was that I did end up going out and starting my own business, which I did nearly 9 years ago. And then when I was working for another IT software company as a consultant, there was these two amazing South African gentlemen who were working on a program which was neuroscience based. And they said, Vanessa, before you touch this program, go and have a look at these books. So I went and picked up those books and I could not put it down. And for me, it was the light bulb moment that I realized that, oh my God, this is how my brain works. This is why I've been doing that. Like, I didn't even know that it was perfectionism that was actually hindering me. I didn't know any of that. It was like all of a sudden I understood my journey and understood that this had to be my future going forward. I had to not only learn this myself, so I went back and studied neuroscience from a leadership and performance perspective, and I re-skilled and retrained. And it's turned everything around for me personally. So you talked about my happiness, because I understood how my brain works. And my son is dyslexic, but is absolutely incredible, and he's achieving amazing things. Like yesterday, he first time ever to get top in his class in English. Like, English is the hardest topic for him. He got 90%, which has never happened in an exam. I know, I'm so proud of him.
I'm so proud of him.
And he's really struggled, all the way through school. And it's still a struggle, but he knows what he wants, but it's really trying to set him up in brain-friendly ways. So I've really applied everything that I've learned to every element of my life, not just mine, my family's, my clients. And what is that? It's really understanding how the brain mechanism actually works for threat and reward and what's the basic instinct. So to explain that really, really quickly is that we have obviously the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that is responsible for executive function. And it's the part of the brain that's evolved the most. And then you have the limbic system, which is your emotional center, and everything goes through the emotional center. So I don't know about you, Fallon, but when I was working my way through the corporate world for over 20 odd years, I was always taught by my mentors and leaders that, oh, Vanessa, when it comes to business, it's business. It's not, you don't bring emotions. Emotions are for home. But actually studying the brain, it was like, again, another light bulb moment for me to go, actually, everything goes through the emotional center of the brain, everything.
You know, as you're mentioning these words, carbohydrates, fat, and, you know, consistent, stable, I think about all the different types of diets that get marketed to me as a woman, or just me as a human. We've got keto, there's intermittent fasting, there's slow carb, there's paleo. You know, if we go way back, there's Atkins, all of this type of stuff. And it's got me thinking, what are the fads that are a bust or that are hurting us in a way that we might not be cognizant of? Like, a lot of people focus on food for fuel just for their body, and they might not be thinking about their brain. What do you have to say about some of these things in your experience?
This is a huge and complex conversation, because I always say to people, follow the money. If someone is trying to sell you a product that they say is the product that's going to do the wonders for you that it's promising, and if they've got a whole lot of books and a whole lot of recipes and they've got this huge platform and they keep on telling you that this is the way to eat, follow the money and look for the research. So I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, the only diet or dietary approach, I prefer that word, that research supports in relation to brain health and overall health is the Mediterranean diet. All the other diets are either having a focus on one item too much and neglecting another item. So for example, let's just take the keto diet. The focus is very much on fat, okay? Limiting carbohydrates. And, you know, people say, oh, well, I love eating bacon. I love eating butter. Who doesn't want to eat these kinds of foods all the time? The challenge is that they're not focusing on the right kind of fat, because those fats actually come from the saturated fat family, not from the essential fat family, which is the 20 to 25% we've spoken about. So they're getting a lot of saturated fat, but not enough of the essential fats. And that means brain's not getting what it needs. So these diets often work for short periods of time because they cut out something that may be a challenge for people. So some people are eating too many carbs, but this is refined carbs, processed carbs. You know, people need to remember that even cauliflower and broccoli and pumpkin, those are carbs as well, but they're nutrient dense carbs. They're not starches. They're not quickly turned into glucose in the body. So they have a stable effect on our blood glucose. So that's a different kind of carb. And even the paleo diet, I've actually written an article where I compare all of these diets, and it's on my blog. And I did that for this exact question, Fallon, because so many people are confused. The paleo diet supposes that at one point in our history, we had a perfect diet and everyone was perfectly healthy. And that is such a gross oversimplification of how we've evolved to where we are and what we now know about our diet. We've never known as much as we know now about how to keep ourselves really, really healthy, and also about what keeps the brain healthy. So the other diets really are limiting, but really a lot of people gravitate to them because they're saying, well, eat these things that are supposedly bad. It's not about that. When you look at the Mediterranean diet, you see there's a wide variety of food. It's nutrient dense, it's fiber filled, it's very colorful. So it's got antioxidants in it, which is the next thing we're going to talk about, keeping our neurons healthy. It's got a whole lot of good fats in it. It's got good protein in it. It's got great carbs in those nutrient dense, fiber filled, colorful foods. So it covers this broad foundation of all the variety of macro and micronutrients that we need. Whereas the other diets limit certain groups of food, and that doesn't leave us healthy ultimately. The long-term observational studies on all of those diets haven't come out yet. And I'd like to see them 20, 30 years down the line. Big questions around all of those.
I read something somewhere, and I wanted to see if it was true with you. Is it true that over 90% of our body's serotonin, or that happy neurotransmitter, which we talked about in our last episode, that is actually made by our gut microbiome?
Fallon, the percentage researchers aren't 100% sure about. It's between maybe 75 and 80, maybe for some people upwards towards 90, yes. And we call that peripheral serotonin. That means it's made outside of the brain. So it's just as important as the serotonin made in the brain, but it is created in the gut. And of course, the health of the gut will influence how much of that serotonin is made and how much of it actually reaches the bloodstream. So yes, critically important serotonin. And the thing about serotonin is a lot of researchers say it's the neurotransmitter that's involved with everything but responsible for nothing. And in that little statement, there's actually a big clue, because serotonin is involved in an enormous amount of things that happen. And for example, serotonin is involved in our appetite regulation. So this is interesting. If you don't have the right foundation and the right environment for the right bacteria to be making enough serotonin, then you can start suffering from cravings, and you don't know when you're really full and you don't know when you're really hungry, because serotonin isn't being created to keep that equilibrium there, that hunger satiation balance. Serotonin is also the foundational compound for melatonin. So if you're not making enough serotonin in your gut because it's not healthy enough, you can't actually have enough of the serotonin required to make melatonin. So then your sleep is affected. Huge problem. And, the third thing is serotonin is involved in equilibrium, or emotional equilibrium. So that's why we know that the gut is linked to things like depression and anxiety, because if you're not making enough serotonin there, once again, you're not getting enough into your bloodstream. That also crosses into the brain through the blood-brain barrier. So serotonin has a huge role to play and is responsible for is involved in a whole lot of different functions. But yes, it all relies on that gut having the right nutrients. And just to step back for a moment, people may be saying, okay, but how does this impact the brain? If we don't have enough of the right gut bacteria, our food isn't digested optimally, it's not absorbed optimally. All of the nutrients that we need, all of the macronutrients and the minor nutrients, so we're talking about things like protein, carbohydrates, and fats. We're talking about the vitamins, which are the micronutrients. We're talking about the minerals. Those are all components that need to be present to make the neurotransmitters. So things like, for example, acetylcholine, which is involved in memory consolidation and learning. If we don't have enough of those raw components, we can't make enough acetylcholine. So guess what? Focus, concentration will be hampered. The same with serotonin. We need all of those components together to make serotonin, and to make things like GABA, and to make things like dopamine. So the raw materials that come from the gut, the quality and the quantity of them will impact those neurotransmitters, which are neuronal messengers. So that is how we impact how the brain functions via the food that we eat.
And there's this whole on paper concept too. I remember even personally, you get to you've been with someone for a certain amount of time, you get around a certain age, and then all the questions come. Oh, you guys are so amazing together. When are you going to get married? When are you going to have children? All this sort of stuff. And you can take stock of your life. And a lot of people say, well, it looked so good on paper. I was checking all of the boxes, right? We're getting all these green checks whilst ignoring these red flags that are coming at. Like, am I wrong? I don't feel like I should be doing this, but everyone's telling me that this is good for me and I should do it. Do you hear that a lot?
Oh, absolutely. And that's something I experienced for myself. And, from the outside looking in, my life looked perfect. I lived a very privileged life. My ex was my business partner. We were very successful. We were like the Barbie and Ken couple. We looked like we were perfectly happy, but it was all a facade. It wasn't what the reality was at home behind closed doors. And I was checking off all those boxes. I, went to college, met my husband, got married, bought a house, just doing all the things. And then I realized I'm checking boxes off of a list, and I didn't even create that list. So I wasn't even really living what I wanted for my life. And also, I didn't know what I wanted from life because I didn't really know myself. And I was always trying to be who I thought other people wanted me to be. And as a result, I was prioritizing other people and their needs and their expectations to the point where I lost myself. And that's really one of the reasons that I ended up in that toxic relationship for the first place, because I didn't have a good understanding of who I was. I thought it was other people's responsibility to meet my needs and make me happy. And simultaneously, I thought it was my job to meet their needs and make them happy. And then I met my then abusive, now ex-husband, and I was catering to him and his life and his needs that I lost myself. And when you are in an emotionally abusive relationship, your entire sense of identity becomes attached to another person. So when that person is removed from your life, it's very disorienting because you don't know who you are. You don't know what to think. You don't know how to make decisions because all of that was controlled. And you don't even know what your own emotions are because you based your emotional system on their emotions. So it can be really challenging to navigate the aftermath.
I can hear this message of listening to yourself. Some people call it intuition, but so many times we always know deep down inside what the right thing to do is, or the thing that our heart yearns for. But women in particular, I find, we spend so much time pushing down our own needs, pushing down what we would really like to do, because there's a life that society has mapped out for us already. It could be our families, it could be work, it could be many different things. But I think the message that I'm really taking away from what you're saying here is only you know what is going to help you feel fulfilled. And listening to that voice is really, really important as a part of that personal journey. It feels like more and more people in my friend circle, professional circle, the relationship that you and I have, more and more people are crashing. And I'm wondering, what are we doing wrong as a society, or what has changed? Why are we where we are?
It's a great question, and this topic of crashing and burning out is so relevant right now. But it's been, because of what we've gone through, I think, in the last 3 years. But I think it's something that has been going on for a very long time. This might have just brought it to a head. But what I see is that this culture of doing and achieving and adding, like always adding more, is top of mind more than a culture of being and honoring what we are and at our core and who we are right now, and maybe even subtracting a little bit. So we've sort of chosen that productive performance culture, and that can be stressful, and it can be it's not for everyone, and it can put a lot of pressure on us to constantly be looking at the external factors and looking at society as a measurement of what we think we need to be, or just feeling like we're never enough. And there's always something we should be doing. So I truly believe in creating our own individual path, allowing our choices to come from a place of self-discovery and self-knowledge. That's what has really helped me drive myself forward, and also helps me mitigate some of the external voices, because they're not necessarily going away. And I think we have to acknowledge that they're there. Can't put blinders onto them. But I refer to that idea, like that concept, as personal power. So it's not power over something or someone, but it is power within ourselves, that power that comes from what we know and what we believe about ourselves, knowing your center, your core, and that's your anchor, that's your home.
You have this nice story of a moment where you were having a conversation with a friend / client that really opened your eyes and changed things for you. And, it sounds like before that you're in that mode of doing what a man's got to do, taking care of my business, I'm checking the boxes, I'm doing great. Everyone's telling me that I'm doing great. But then tell us about this conversation that you had that changed everything.
Yeah, so I think I've been talking about, leading. Like I said, I enjoyed the teaching aspect, but there are just certain things that I didn't like. So I remember I had a client and I drove down to meet him and talk with him, and he kind of asked me if I was happy. It was somewhere along those lines. I was like, not really, but it pays bill, it pays well for the most part. And yeah, and he's like, then why you stay? I was just like, oh yeah, why would I leave? It's a good gig, and he's like, but why? And he kept asking me that why, and like trying to get that out of me. I was like, look, insurance. And he's like, you got to be kidding me. That's why you're staying. And I was like, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, I need stability. And I think from then on, I had a long drive, like 3-hour drive back, and I was like just thinking that through, just replaying that in my head, and I was just like, wow, is that really my only reason why I'm staying here? And I do like, some parts of the job, of course, I've learned so much, but, what do I really want to do? And then I think that was the moment for me where I was like, look, I'm young, I'm healthy, I think I can get by, and I have some savings. I think I could figure out a way to make this work. And then I'm not going to lie to myself. I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to be disciplined, save more money, and then figure out a plan. So that was like the first part of the moment. And then I had, other friends that were close to me as well that really encouraged me and said, just do it. What are you waiting for? So that really helped me. But that was definitely a catalyst for me to really jump out of that, I guess, that comfort zone. And I don't know if you're like, I love this analogy. I think a lot of people have seen it, but they say like, this is a circle and that's your comfort zone, and all the good stuff happens like outside of that. Right. So that's kind of where I was in that comfort zone, and I finally got out to try something new.
I am not someone who does things like sets New Year's resolutions, but I've got a lot of friends who are like really into it, and they're amazing, and they've got all the checklists, and they're really good at setting goals and then going after them and achieving them. I'm one of these people who tends to, I don't want to set myself up for disappointment. And so I'm a little bit cautious to do that. And I wonder sometimes, does the relationship that a person has with a goal or with goal setting in general impact on your ability to achieve them? And do you see that often?
Well, a lot of people do think of goal as a 4-letter word, and it is. Goal is a 4-letter word, but it's one of those things that everybody does have their own relationship with it. And I've had people, they're like, oh, I hate goals. And then we talk and I'm like, but you set them all the time. They just don't use the G word. So it's really about your relationship with it. And you mentioned the beginning of the year, you would think January is my busy season, and it is, but I like to start the year in December, because it gives people a running start into the new year. This is arbitrary. Okay, beginning of the year, we're going to set goals. Okay, fine. By the end of the month, maybe by February, people's goals have gotten thrown out the window. But when you are in the state of goal flow, okay, I just made up a new thing. But when you are living the life that you want and working towards the things that are going to elevate you in your personal life, in your career, et cetera, then maybe the beginning of the year you refresh your goals. Or I think of the 4 seasons. So we've got January, which most people do. We have the summer, the fall, and December. So my 4 seasons are different than like almost everybody else's. But it's a constant evolution. So again, you start with that intent. What is the life you want? Your goals are going to evolve. Maybe you need to do something different to get whatever it is you intend to create into the world, but you still have that mission behind what you're doing, which I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So you start with the intent, the mission behind what you're doing, and then you do the things to turn the life you want into reality. And yes, the people who set goals in January and they've got their list, good for you. But just remember, just because you fail by February, it does not mean you have to wait till the next year to start again.
And people are really voting with their feet. We have an amazingly strong labor market right now. And I mean, you and I are of a similar age, and maybe our parents as well. You know, we are our fathers' daughters and all of that type of thing. And we've kind of grown up during this time where like employee engagement was the measure. It's the one that's on all the KPIs. What's our engagement score? What's our NPS? And that was supposed to be the big predictor. How are people spending their discretionary effort? Are they engaged? And that's the big success criteria for your organization. Is the idea that many people are now setting boundaries, people are setting boundaries is now being conceived as quitting corporations. And is that an outdated idea? Like, is that out of step? Because are we thinking about things the wrong way? Because a boundary isn't quitting.
Mm-hmm. The whole thing with quiet quitting that I've been seeing something on LinkedIn and stuff that it's a form of gaslighting, if you will. And I was like, oh, that's a hot take. That companies are saying, oh, you're quiet quitting, trying to make people feel bad for not working for free. And I mean, companies who care about their people are not going to burn them out, and they're not going to feel this way. Because again, people who want to go above and beyond, they're going to do that regardless. But yeah, I just, I feel like this quiet quitting is a trend. This is going to go away at some point. It's just the buzzword right now, but there's more to it, like you said, with the boundaries things. And that came from, again, us going through the pandemic, realizing what was all important to us individually. And now so many people want to stay work from home. Like, I don't need to come in to do PowerPoints all day. I don't need to come in for that. I can stay home, be with my Basset Hound all day, and be happy. And it's so these boundaries don't just, the quiet quitting thing doesn't mean anyone is doing any less. It just means I'm doing exactly what you hired me for. And so if you want people to do more, then raise the salary and then raise the whatever it is you expect of them, because that's how the salary works, right? Like, suppose if they do salary right, it's the what you produce for them, not the hours in which you did it. And there's something to be said about that too.